I hope that more media buyers and media strategists are deeply familiar with the retailers that are important to their clients. That's the hope I have from a strategy and approach standpoint. From a technology perspective, I think we may see a greater evolution of programmatic around moments of intent or like pre-intent, like starting to model more of that to get at folks before maybe they engage an agent, an AI agent.
Welcome to Unlocking Retail Media, the podcast where we explore the evolving world of retail media, from data strategy to monetization and everything in between. This is the podcast that breaks down how retailers can build smarter, data-driven media networks by aligning with what brands truly need, from scalable ad solutions and meaningful metrics to cross-channel attribution and programmatic strategy.
Today, I'm excited to get a different perspective on retail media, one from the kind of brand and agency side. My guest is Lee Dunbar, SVP and Head of Retail Media at Starcom. He's been at Starcom for more than 15 years, and he's helped some of the biggest brands out there like Procter & Gamble and Kraft, Heinz, really connect media, commerce, and creativity in really smart ways. He's seen retail media evolve from kind of the old school shopper marketing to what it is today, one of the most important parts of modern advertising. So we'll talk about that shift, how it happened, what brands and agencies are really looking for from retail media networks, and where the space is headed. So Lee, thanks for being here. I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, same here. Really appreciate the time and opportunity to talk about the hot topics, right, in retail media.
Yeah, and I think, and it is like I just said, I think it's especially for the people we work with, because we're working with their RMNs. They're constantly working with the agencies and the brands, right? So it's like I love talking to our customer's customer, and I think they love to kind of hear from you what you're what you guys are looking for, what your brands are looking for. Because that's, that dictates how they're building their RMN, what they're thinking about. So maybe to kick it off, like what's, maybe you give us a little bit about your background in retail and kind of what you've seen over the years.
Yeah. It sort of was a slow burn. My first assignment at Starcom was, or at least one of the first ones was, hey, can you, take a look at this Amazon buy? And kind of help us manage that for this client. It's the first one they've done. Really excited for the holiday, and of course, what do you do in your early career? Yeah, of course, I'll take a look at that. And then that turned into, hey, we heard you did this before with Amazon. Can you take a look at this bigger buy for this other brand? And so that started into just being the go-to because I was blessed with some brands that were very active in e-commerce, much more even than their whole portfolio. Braun electric razors within P&G obviously was much more leaned into e-commerce at the early stage because of the category of consumer electronics. Sometimes I think, hey, if I was assigned another brand that wasn't necessarily leaned into e-commerce right away, what would happen? So
yeah, you might still be doing like circulars and installs in grocery stores or something.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah. So no, and it's great to you get that opportunity, and then you just really get excited for it because it's something a little different, and then you find, hey, you can apply maybe those other channels to what's happening here, particularly with video and how we're deploying that even from a TV strategy. I remember thinking about advertising load, and even now I still talk about advertising load within retail search. Like how many ads are showing up in this, and is that too much for the shopper, et cetera?
Yeah, you start to hear that about Amazon. I always try to pay attention to like when does like a normie, right? Like somebody not in the ad industry mention something. And when you hear somebody and they mention like, oh, Amazon's all ads now. You're like, okay, like you probably reached that load point that it's kind of too high. Just like when people watch like streaming TV and they're like, why am I watching the same commercial over and over again? Right. Like if it kind of percolates to somebody who's not really paying attention, then you start to think, the ad load is probably pretty high.
Yeah. No, people are sophisticated. They know what's paid, what's not. Particularly if it doesn't even say it's a paid ad, I think they still kind of have a sense of, well, this is not exactly what I searched for, or am in pursuit of. And so it's kind of interesting, especially you see that in social, but you certainly see it with retail.
Yeah, and so like kind of keying in on that, like you've watched retail media evolve. Do you think, where do you think we are on the kind of maturity level of retail media? Like, do you feel like the networks are kind of getting there, or do you feel like we still have a long way to go to get to where kind of some of the other, mediums are?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just unpacking even the word medium, it's like, is this a channel or not? And I constantly go back to Kara Pratt's statement when she was at Kroger and now she's at Circana, with that retail media is a channel and a layer. And so how do we view this as almost part of someone's marketing tech stack versus just a channel? Unlike social, where it's like, okay, it became its own channel, its own right, or even digital video, it became its own channel, its own right. Retail is sort of this odd duck of, yes, there's certainly a channel of retail media. I lead the practice for that, so I got to believe that. But then there's these arms that reach into the other channels where that becomes more of that layer. And so I think as a standalone channel, it's certainly started to mature. I think it's early innings yet because when you look at it as a channel, you have, Citrus Ad several years ago had what's called fixed tenancy, where you bid on a term and it's consistently going to show up every time you search for that term. And I remember as a media buyer, I was like, oh, I love this. It takes the guesswork out of things. What was it? 2 weeks ago, Amazon announced almost the same thing for brand terms. So you can own that brand term for 30, 60, 90 days. I forget, what the settings were. Now that's for brand terms, not for category terms, but it's still kind of resurrecting some of those, 2020, 2019, we were talking about some of these tactics, and now it's like, it's back again. And so I think as a channel, it's like, I think there's still some ways it can evolve. Certainly as we talk about agentic, I don't want to jump too far ahead. As a layer, as something that's a layer in other channels, I think this is where there's still some need for maturity. Where, all right, how does the retailer become part of my video buy? And that could be audience targeting. In some cases, like with Walmart and Amazon, they actually own inventory, right? How does that get included? And how does the retailer understand how it sits against a Paramount Plus, et cetera, to know that, all right, I have to act like, this, or I'm more like a Circana. I'm a data layer and I need to be exceedingly easy to use. The retailers are getting there, but I think that's still an area of sophistication of like, you're not necessarily a channel. You're now a layer and in the tech stack. And so you end up having to talk to way more stakeholders than I think they used to. But in the long term, it's probably a good path to being so integrated that you're part of every media plan.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's an interesting, retail media kind of feels like it covers, like you said, a lot of different things. There's a part of it that is just kind of trade dollars, like shopper marketing, right? Like it's like we've renamed what was already happening, whether it was buying end caps or paying to put your name in like a circular. And then there's, what you were just talking about with like CTV, where it's layering data into a buy on Hulu, right? Which is much more like part of a traditional media campaign.
Right.
Like,
and so a different source of dollars.
Yeah. So like when an agency like yourselves, it's like, do you guys dealing with both of those sets of dollars? Are you focused on the more performance media side? Like how do you guys work with your brands?
Yeah, I mean, well, Starcom as part of Publicis Group is definitely, a legacy media agency, and I say that proudly. I'm not saying that as a derisive thing. I'm excited that we have the history and the ability to. We've been buying TV since TV began, right? Technically, we've been buying, when we were Leo Burnett's media department, and so there's this deep seed of understanding the national picture and national media. You combine that with the performance aspect, and it's like, all right, now we can be full service and really understand how all the media channels work together. And that really was kind of my path when we're talking about some of the more specialized agencies of like, well, they know, they may know the Amazon piece, and we can have a bake-off to understand how either one of us can do sponsored ads better. And I will definitely be in that bake-off anytime, a client wants to understand, can we do it better? I think we could. I'm biased. But you combine that with the ability of, well, I know they don't have the purchasing power that we have from a video perspective, or even from any channel, because we're sitting across a huge amount of the media marketplace from a national perspective. And so there's that total picture piece. I also think there's a understanding the language a little bit more to know, okay, how does this channel fit with this channel, and working with a marketing lead at an agency that may, at a client that has to sort of understand all sides of the ball. So I think that's the other aspect too. I think there's still some ways the agency can get better about understanding folks outside the marketing department, because I think that's the area where I pride myself and pride my team on, of you've got to go beyond just the marketing team, because there's so many other folks asking questions about what the media can do for their retail relationship. I got excited the other day when I was like, oh, the merchant's going to be there.
Yeah.
They're like celebrities to me, because it's like, all right, cool. I get to understand how that person's operating versus just the standard, media side.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how, when you're thinking about these campaigns, are they starting to come together, right? Like the shopper marketing and the larger performance, or national exposure, brand exposure campaigns. Cause you kind of think about it, it's like a marketing department's tasked with, hey, we want to move more of this product. Maybe it's at this store, maybe it's just in general. And there's a lot of different things that go into that. Are they looking at these as kind of comprehensive campaigns, or are these still kind of siloed off a lot of times?
I think they're still siloed off at times. I think some of that's by virtue of who has the dollars and who's able to leverage dollars for what tactics. Sometimes they create swim lanes of okay, only this team can do X tactics because that's so close to the sales aspect or understanding what your supply is, and very deep business needs that a sales team is going to understand. And so by I think in some cases just for their own sanity, they split those dollars apart.
Right.
In other cases, it's a little bit of a levy to make sure that all the dollars don't just get eaten by sponsored ads.
Right. Yeah.
Oh man, if the sales team had their way, they just pour it all in there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. And so there's a little bit of that back and forth. But I do think CPGs, especially who aren't used to sales optimized media, that's still retail media brought that to a lot of the CPGs that were more so in the wholesale business, right?
Right.
And so that forces them to sort of go through the same stages that banking did, that automotive did, where there's a little bit more of a sales path to understanding how that media is doing. Obviously we had MMM and we had third-party sales studies, but we didn't necessarily have the same quick read of how the sales was attached to that. And so I still dust off the long and short of it and some other frameworks where we're understanding how sales dollars and brand dollars can work together. Understanding that the sales dollars used to be thought of, that's just short-term tactics like display. In my view, it's like, no, we're going to elevate that. The sales activation media is going to actually be literal sales activation where we're using sales data to inform the audience and then optimize it against it. So I think that's kind of one of the bigger strategic shifts that both agencies and brands have had to have is I got more than one KPI, and it's not just awareness. I can do more.
Yeah. I think it's always we always have the similar conversation when you think about search, and people looked at search ads and said, look at the, the conversion rates of these search ads. But then you go back and you say, well, why are people searching for this? Right. And it's because of the campaign you ran. It's because of the national campaign you ran. It's because of the, right. It's like there's a lot driving to that, that outcome that's capturing the last mile, which is important, right? Like it's getting them over that last mile hump, but there's a lot of work that went into getting them into that search, right? Interested in that product category or interested in that specific product or company. And so I think retail media, it's like the more I feel like in the future, it's like we get more to how are these campaigns run and tracked cohesively. So that you're running a national campaign that's driving, customers to Walmart for a product, and then you're making sure that your on-site experience at Walmart matches that campaign.
Yep.
And they're, and then they're being led down this, that last mile, right? You're not losing them to a great value product or something, right? Like you're making sure you close the deal once you get them there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, one of my favorite reports that Procter does every year is the day after the Super Bowl. It's like, we're not just going to talk about who had the best Super Bowl ad. We're going to talk about who showed up in retail well. When that ad comes on, all right, let's make sure they own that brand term and who shows up effectively. And that's absolutely a case in point of, all right, thinking about the total picture and understanding that, this larger TV spend is absolutely going to impact what I'm doing from a retail perspective. Well,
awesome. So let's get into something that is, I know, very near and dear to all of our customers' hearts, which is really, you work with a lot of the biggest brands in the world. What are they looking for in retail media networks, and maybe what are they not getting today, right? Like if we compare Amazon to some of the other, hundreds of retail media networks out there today.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to compare Amazon to everybody, and I think that's one area that sometimes I think we fall trap to, even our own. For Mars United, the report card is great because it gives a really good consistent benchmark across the retailers. The nuance there is Amazon is making more money in advertising than it is from food and beverage.
Yeah.
Than it is from, I think, toys and some other categories. And so it's truly a media agency a media partner that happens to sell things. In the case of Walmart, in the case of other retailers, they very much have to still, maintain their primary business of selling. Hence the separate orgs. And so, I think there is a desire to, all right, can you be like Amazon? But I think in some cases when I'm working with brands, don't necessarily think they can do that, because what Amazon does in media and those capabilities, it may lack from a physical presence in people's lives, outside of what's on the people's on porches, right? But if you look at Walmart, there's just a powerful story in that there's 4,000 of these stores all across the United States. And that is something that goes well outside of the major cities. That's something that I think is really powerful to understand. Like, not only what I do with a media partner like a Walmart is going to impact something in Dixon, Illinois, as much as it's going to do in, Chicago, Illinois. And,
right.
and that's a really, the fact that you can bring to scale a brand experience across all those environments, or like, Dollar General, certainly it gives us, I think that's another thing we look for is incremental reach and being able to find audiences that no one else has. Dollar General tells a great story in terms of we have rural, low income audiences that maybe are getting missed by other partners. And, let's add that incremental reach to what you're looking for. So I think, and I think that's probably the name of the game for most retailers that the brands are looking for, is like, hey, what's your audience story, especially for non-endemic? Who do you have that maybe I can't find elsewhere? Outside of just eligible shoppers at a channel that's important to me. That's obviously critical.
Yeah. So let's say maybe a good example, if we think of random CPG brand, right? It's like, and you're looking at a, kind of a campaign. Maybe Amazon's going to be in there. Maybe it's Walmart's going to be in there. Like, how do you think about what are the other networks that are going to be in that campaign? Like the Dollar General example was great, right? Because Dollar General can definitely bring, their whole name of their whole business was like, where are their basically Walmart deserts, right? Like where are you not within a certain range of a Walmart, like put a Dollar General there, right? And so they're reaching a group that's not there. But how do you think about, the rest of grocery or other kind of convenience, like things like that? Like do they come into the picture when you're thinking about building this kind of retail media campaign?
I think for a sales oriented team that is focused on growing sales, especially for like a grocery CPG, you have to wrestle with the fact that you're going to have 10 or 12 partners, I think. We can talk about narrowing the dollars, but you absolutely have to serve the long tail. Otherwise, you're not necessarily serving all your customers effectively. And more importantly, you might be missing out on some market opportunities. You might find that the CPCs, as they have been, are much lower in some of these smaller grocery partners than they are with like an Amazon, because there's so much demand on Amazon. And so even from a marketplace perspective, there's a necessity for a retail media team to be able to ingest and understand and execute across multiple partners and fit them in. Now, every strategy, every media plan has to have choice. I can't just say, just give me them all. But I think having a wider aperture for who you include in the plan as a retail media buyer is critical. And it has to be hand in glove. Unlike other media choices, this has to be rooted in where my sales are and where my sales growth is, and some of the broader political aspects of, hey, if I do this, I got to make sure that I'm going to get credit for it, that the retailer appreciates it, and that there's going to be maybe some incremental display. And so there's very much, and I know we like to knock sometimes that retail media is a tax, or like it feels like I'm paying them off. There's absolute media use out of that. It's just but I don't want to just ignore the fact that yes, there is a benefit to the broader relationship, and it depends on the P&L, right? For every retailer, sometimes it's a separate thing, and the merchant doesn't care if you're spending it. That I think can be a little frustrating for a media buyer, plugged into retail media, is wait a second, I have to put my thumb on the scale for this partner because they've been really great about accepting my client's product, that they have a wider assortment of my client's product here, but their media is not nearly as good. And it's tough to keep all those variables in your head. And I've said this in some other instances. It's just I've told my team, hey, by the end of this, you're going to be able to run for Congress, because you have to talk to so many different stakeholders and understand how to please everybody. That's it's a harder journey, but I think it's that's where I get most excited. Is oh yeah, we're at the tip of the spear, and we're really helping their business, and we're helping their business at Giant Eagle, not just a Walmart.
Right. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I think it's something that's kind of more unique about retail media, right? Is it is it's been inserted into what is a really important relationship between a brand and a retailer, right? That some of those relationships have gone back 150 years, right? You can go find a grocer that's been working with a big CPG brand for 100 years, and now there's kind of a media angle in the middle of it, right?
Yeah. And the merchant supplier relationship has existed for even longer, right? Just in general. And so it's you're taking this dynamic that's been in place for so long, and now here's the media guy coming in and asking what the cost is. And that's sometimes I've said that even to my boss several times. I'm just I just don't want to be the media agency jerk who's going to, upend things. We got to be cool.
Yeah, totally. And I think that kind of leads into, one of the questions we have a lot is I think right now there's kind of a lot of fragmentation, right? We joke, we're launching helping people launch 1,000 walled gardens, so there's kind of all this fragmentation. You can call it inefficiency. People think about, is consolidation coming? Is it going to go programmatic? Is this kind of the Cambrian explosion of retail media, and then it's going to come back down? But then I think on the flip side, it's you look at those relationships and you think, well, maybe it's not. So how do you think about that?
It's a good topic. The whole idea of fragmentation. I think the last 20 years has been all about a duopoly, and and I don't want to talk about the merits of each of those partners, but we've been sort of trained, I think, as media buyers, especially, but even as brand marketers, that the marketplace can be simple, and it's something that should be simple. And any economist is going to tell you that a fragmented marketplace is good for buyers.
Right.
And so, when I get on my high horse about this, but fragmentation is essential to a really healthy marketplace. And so, and this agency, as most media agencies, were born out of the fragmentation of cable and local TV, and needing a deeper and deeper specialization that understood that world and wasn't just buying, the couple networks in print. And so understanding that fragmentation fueled specialization of these agencies and sort of our reason for being, I'm we need that. Now, hey, it's a benefit to the marketplace. As you said, is there going to be some consolidation? I'm sure there's going to be some consolidation of the ad tech that powers these retailers. But as we saw, the regulatory environment that ran regardless of party is going to be scrutinizing any sort of consolidation of the retailers themselves.
Right.
Particularly with grocery. I mean, that's certainly a world that people are very keen on keeping grocery prices down. And so enabling or accelerating consolidation on the retailer side might be a little bit difficult to do for anyone. And so if they're going to be separated, I think we're probably going to be looking at any sort of consolidation being SSP based. Hey, it's going to connect to each of these partners. That being said, is a merchant going to cede the other half of their search feed and experience to just a company they don't necessarily that's doing the same thing across all their competitors? Maybe, maybe not. I think they're all going to want to have their special sauce. So I think there's still going to be a necessity for, all right, how do I understand the Hy-Vee algorithm versus the HEB versus the Safeway, for Safeway Albertsons piece. And so, again, and I'm biased, right? The media guy wants a fragmented marketplace. I could see a world where it starts to get a little more consolidated, but I hope it still retains, and I think there's reason for believing that it'll retain some element of fragmentation from a on-site perspective.
Yeah, no, 100%, because I think especially retailers just have not only the unique relationship we talked about with the supplier, the merchant relationship, but also, they have a physical footprint, right? They have something that is not, unlike a website, because we kind of saw this in First Digital, right? It was like originally you're buying single campaigns on AOL or on CNN, and then now it's kind of like, well, you go to Trade Desk and you buy across all of them. Right. But I think they never had that, really defensibility of like people are going into their store, right? Or people are getting that delivered anymore, right? Like it was like it all kind of became commoditized. I think in retail media, we're never going to see it get fully commoditized because there is all these things we've just talked about, that unique relationship, that the idea of a physical store, that you're actually at this point of commerce, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's that's what makes it very interesting. I think we may see more of the consolidation or syndication on the offsite, certainly. And you see Trade Desk start to talk about data marketplaces and really starting to own more of that relationship. But then again, back to fragmentation, you're seeing Yahoo and Google start to lean into the retail data marketplace world. You're seeing Meta start to do the same thing. So there may still be some fuel for the choices that we can have in offsite too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, offsite retail media, like I think you guys have probably been buying campaigns with retailer data for 10 years, right? Like it's not really, it's not really a new thing. It's just now retail media. So that's great.
Yeah. No, you can be more direct and specialized, which is, that's what's been so powerful. And the prices have come down, significantly from where they were.
Right. So I think one of the, you obviously get to look at a lot of different retail media networks. And I know lots of people listening to this are the people on the other side, the people building those retail media networks. So really as from your position, what are you seeing that's exciting out there, right? Like either new units or measurement or, what when you see as, a new retail media network announces a feature, like what would excite you as a buyer?
I think the more things can get integrated easily. So Best Buy, and in full disclosure, they're a client, but I told this to their face, I was like, this is really great, is the ability to get on-site inventory via programmatic, and just having that as a deal. Dead simple, but I think it's a great way to incorporate on-site inventory in a very controlled way that can be integrated into a plan. And I think we'll find more and more ways that sort of allows a national brand to incorporate maybe some of that inventory, particularly with in-store and some of the screens. There's some great takeovers and things like that I think are powerful. But the more that can get, hey, that's an inventory source for my out-of-home buy, or that's an inventory source for my programmatic video buy. That's another area where I get. Again, it sounds very, simple, but I think that's another great way to be like, all right, how can I incorporate that? There was years ago, we used to treat gas station TV as a day part in video buying, just because we wanted to incorporate different channels and layers. And so I would love to see a world where in-store starts to kind of reflect some of that opportunity of, hey, it can be a day part in my video strategy. And it's sort of dead simple. The brand just sort of includes that within their plan, and it's not the sort of grandiose standalone plan with a publisher that I have to sell in every year. It's just part of my media ecosystem.
Yeah. And do you think when you're doing that, would you want to be buying the specific retailer, or does it get as open as, hey, I'm happy to buy any grocery chain in this DMA that I'm targeting, right?
It depends, right? For non-endemic, you can imagine a QSR is going to want any. Now, for endemic, I think there still has to be some element of choice and really being intentional with what retailers you include there. And even within in-store, I've talked about this with several clients and with agency partners. I think out-of-home is digital signage in store is very easy on the perimeter and in entryways and in checkout. When we start to get into the world of end caps and at shelf, I feel like I'm primed and ready to get the merchant not very happy with me just like buy this sign and oh man, that's behind a competitive brand's product that I spent weeks trying to figure out that in the planogram. And so there's definitely going to be some back and forth, and it's like, all right, for that I probably need to be very partnered with a merchant to make sure that I'm telling a cohesive story. On the perimeter, I'm like, all day we're finally, we're getting these shoppers, and maybe they'll buy us the next time they're here, particularly when we're talking about food CPG and where people are coming there with frequency.
And you kind of talked about this a couple times, but I'm curious where, do you see, I'd say today we mostly see retailers 100% focused on endemic, right? Like they're looking at how do we get, the brands that we have in the store. Do you think non-endemic will make its way to retail media?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's like, I don't think there's this flood of cash waiting for the retailers if they only just opened it up. And I've told that to folks that are looking for the non-endemic dollars. I think in some cases it's easier, for a non-endemic to make that investment because they're not beholden to the merchant or any sort of, there's no relationship hangover or anything. It's just like, great, I can be in Aldi's. Well, let me be there. Let me go to Walmart's. I want to be there because I know the next place they're going to go is probably, to get lunch with their kid or to go get a coffee. And so for QSR, it makes sense, or for insurance, right? I mean, they're trying to find anybody who owns a home, and so you're getting to these wide distribution places. Checkout screens is a great case of, for an endemic, you would think it makes total sense for them. But for non-endemic, it's a lot easier because every endemic client I've talked to with checkout screens, I'm like, you're going to see everybody who shops in that store. Aren't you excited? I'm like, well,
on their way out,
made their purchase on their way out. I'm getting them on the way out. You're killing me, and so that's a little difficult. But I'm like, it's such an opportunity. They're looking at the screen, and so that's like, well, it's a branding opportunity for a non-endemic.
Right.
And so that's again way easier of a sell, I think. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting as you might see sort of two-tiered pricing, two-tiered benefits for non-endemics to lean in to the stores, particularly within store, but I think the audiences too. I mean, there's a lot of unique data sets in terms of, all right, if I look at convenience store data as a way to get at folks on road trips, great for QSR. If I look at different flavor profiles, that's a great way to sell in maybe a product that attaches itself well to that flavor profile. Maybe they're into barbecue. Let me sell barbecue sandwiches to those people. And of course, there's going to be some interesting ways of, some convenience stores might view QSRs as a competitor. So there's some fights to be had.
Yeah. I mean, I think, just thinking more about it, right? There's even like the quasi-endemic, right? Like if you're checking out at the grocery store and you just bought a couple racks of ribs, it's like, wouldn't somebody who makes a grill or a smoker want to reach you right there? Right. Like it's just a branding opportunity. Like the store doesn't sell that, but it's not like just State Farm Insurance, right? Which I'm sure they want to be there too, but it's like a different, it's something that it's tied to that data, that in the moment, purchase data that you have that's unique.
Right.
You also probably assume they have a house, right? Because you're grilling ribs on your patio at the apartment, you're going to burn it down, right? So you can make assumptions and learn things about the data here. To really make that endemic kind of, or non-endemic kind of, more powerful and targeted.
Yeah. No, there's nothing more personal in terms of all the different signals than someone's grocery list, right? It's just like everyone's got their own sort of nuances, and the barbecue ribs or anything in terms of what interests them, how many kids they have, or are they eating at home a lot, or are they out? Yeah.
And what do you think? So kind of looking 5 years ahead, like where, what do you think's change? What's going to change in retail media, if we're 5 years in the future?
Yeah. I mean, I hope that more media buyers and media strategists are deeply familiar with the retailers that are important to their clients. I think that's the hope I have from a strategy and approach standpoint. From a technology perspective, I think we may see a greater evolution of programmatic and around moments of intent or like pre-intent, like starting to model more of that to get at folks before maybe they engage an agent, an AI agent. I think that'll be really interesting to see how agentic retail starts to impact how people interact with the retail sites. There's a great article floating around in terms of treating the .com, any brand.com, any retailer.com as just part of someone's workflow. You don't visit Walmart.com anymore, or Kroger.com anymore, or Aldi.com anymore. You have your agent go there, and they sort of sort it out and look at the grocery list that you had last week, and maybe ask you a few questions in terms of like, hey, do you want to really have that meal again, or maybe you want to look at this adjacent one that's just as easy to make, and I would love a world where maybe it starts to get a little cross retailer. One example I've seen get discussed is there a world where retail media is part of someone making their grocery list and then bidding that out to 4 or 5 different retailers with their agent to say like, okay, well, hey, I got $100 here, and like, if you could lower that down, I'll definitely get my order through you guys. Now, that's not something I can do as a human, but an agent certainly can do that. Particularly if it's getting delivered, that's no skin off of my back to have a different grocer fulfill that. Obviously everyone's got their own, nuances in terms of what brands they like, but that's something that's like, there's incentives for people to do that in order to save money. Now, where does advertising fit into that? There's certainly going to be some opportunity for suggested items or suggested trips and the retailers bidding each other out. And maybe the advertising goes towards that margin that they lose. Like, I think there's some really interesting ways that people can purchase in more sophisticated ways. I don't think the agents will be completely free to go make whatever purchases they want. But the fact that I can be enabled by an AI agent makes me kind of a super shopper, someone that like can absolutely do whatever they want and extract the most value, particularly for maybe my family's groceries than I ever have. So you start to talk about that. That doesn't just impact retail media, then that impacts marketing as a whole. Like how do I inspire someone with my video campaign to then maybe interact with that agent and get that added to their list, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think this has become like the topic we always get to on every episode so far of this podcast,
Good.
Which is great because I think.
And sorry, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's good timing. I think as we look at where it goes, like agentically, right? Like the one world you can see, right, is that the media opportunity moves from the retailer's site, like to like an open AI to like an agent, right? Because like if you're at that point of, if you're saying, hey, I want to make, chicken enchiladas tonight, and the agent's like, here you go, this is what you need, do you want me to order it for you, right? It's like the media opportunity is kind of right there to be like, hey, and if you'd like, you normally get this salsa, but would you like to try, you should really try this other salsa that we think you'd like, right? And like that's a media opportunity, but it kind of shifts from, you can't do that on Kroger.com anymore. You have to, that now becomes OpenAI's like business, right?
Right.
I think it's going to disproportionately affect like CPG compared to some other like categories. Like we were thinking about like, my refrigerator broke. It's like, I might go talk to the agent, talk to, OpenAI and say like, hey, I'm looking at a new refrigerator. This is what I currently have, but I'm probably not going to tell it, go buy me a $3,000, $1,000 refrigerator. Right. No. I'm probably going to go research, right? I'm probably going to go say, I'm going to click through to Home Depot. I'm going to click through to Best Buy. I'm going to like go look at the different, kind of spend some time on that. Right. Whereas like you said, if I'm just getting, chicken and beans and stuff delivered to my house, like, do I really care? Right. Like it's like going to be much more likely to kind of outsource that.
Well, and what's interesting, and this is what's kept, I think folks up at night from an e-commerce adoption of grocery, is there's persistent categories that people are just very keen on buying in person, like produce.
Yeah.
And it depends on the, segmentation and how that person, what culture they're in and et cetera, whether or not they're going to trust some picker to choose what peppers and bananas, et cetera, that they're going to have. So there could be some interesting nuances there of like, well, I really like this type of cereal or this type of item included. But I agree, like CPG, it'll be it's already very difficult, right? Like the terms that we're really aggressive on when we think about sponsored ads are beef, ketchup, very commoditized terms to begin with, and that's where obviously private label shows up quite a bit. In some cases, private label is just pinned to the top.
Right.
And so yeah, I think it's already been tough for CPG, and maybe in this world it's sort of similar. I do think there could be the ways that people intervene maybe in their purchases could be more powerfully hit on with someone that's a brand that actually has a story to tell and has some unique capabilities. But I mean, those are the same tricks in the bag, right? Of just like do better marketing to try to make people love your brand, and you have new innovation where nobody else has that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's tough.
It's gonna be interesting, right? It's gonna be very interesting to see how this all develops.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that there's some ways this rhymes with the voice search introspection I think we had for several years, where we're like, well, Alexa's everywhere. They're basically giving these items away, and how are we going to show up in voice commerce? And there was a lot of heat on it, and then it sort of started to die down. I think in part because it wasn't too fundamental a change from how folks are creating their grocery lists, and obviously people stopped sort of adopting that. I think with agents it'll be a little different, but I think I'm hearing the same sort of stories of like, all right, we got to figure out discovery and like how do we get our content better, and it's almost like we got to just return back to the fundamentals of just how do we make sure we're eminently discoverable wherever someone's looking.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, like I think you were right talking about the produce side where I'm still, maybe I'm old, but I go to the grocery store, right? And buy my stuff at the grocery store. And it kind of brings in-store back into focus, right? That if, maybe if e-commerce kind of starts to gravitate towards a lot of these agentic buyers for CPG, then you're really back to how do you make that in-store experience way better and more digital.
Right. Yeah. How do you, and it's funny, both from an in-store and then an online perspective, all this new technology almost shortens the trip, right? And so it's like they have less time to make an impact, both in-store and online, because of just how quick we're making commerce.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Makes your job a little more interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on, Lee. I think this will be a really interesting conversation for all of our listeners. And so I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the time, and this was wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Unlocking Retail Media. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share this show with your network. We'll be back soon with more insights to help you navigate the future of retail media. See you next time.